Picture this. It's 2:17 a.m. Your phone rings. Hospital. Your daughter, 7 months pregnant, beaten unconscious with a golf club by her own husband. But here's what will shock you. The affair that triggered this brutal attack, it never existed. The mistress? She had no idea she was being used. The loving husband, he'd been planning this murder for months. And the pregnant wife's father, he's a Fortune 500 CEO who's about to show Derek Sullivan what real power looks like. What happens when a sociopathic abuser picks the wrong family? When a man who owns half the city decides to destroy someone completely and legally. This isn't just a story about domestic violence. This is about systematic revenge so calculated, so devastating, that Derek's world doesn't just collapse, it gets obliterated piece by piece. By the end of this story, you'll understand exactly why some men should never underestimate a father's love or his fury. Stay with me, because what William Matthews does to Derek Sullivan will leave you speechless. The hospital phone rang at 2:17 in the morning, cutting through the silence like a blade. William Matthews rolled over in his king-size bed. His reading glasses clattered to the nightstand. The caller ID made his blood freeze. St. Mary's Hospital Emergency Department. Mr. Matthews. The voice was professional but urgent. A woman. Tired. This is Dr. Sarah Henderson. I'm calling about your daughter, Rebecca. What happened? Bill sat up straight. His heart hammered against his ribs. Sir, Rebecca has been severely injured. She's 7 months pregnant, and we've had to perform an emergency cesarean section. You need to come immediately. The words hit him like physical blows. Severely injured. Emergency surgery. His little girl. Is she alive? Bill's voice came out as a whisper. She's stable but critical. Sir, this appears to be a domestic violence incident. Domestic violence. The words echoed in Bill's head as he threw on the first clothes his hands found. Jeans. A wrinkled shirt. His wife Margaret stirred beside him. Bill, what's wrong? Rebecca's in the hospital. Get dressed. Now. Margaret's face went white in the lamplight. What happened? I'll explain in the car. The drive to St. Mary's passed in a blur of streetlights and ignored traffic signals. Bill's Mercedes ate up the empty streets while Margaret gripped the dashboard. Tell me exactly what they said, Margaret demanded. Emergency surgery. Domestic violence. Bill's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. That son of a bitch hurt my daughter. Derek wouldn't hurt Rebecca. There has to be some mistake. There's no mistake. Margaret, I could hear it in the doctor's voice. They reached the hospital in 12 minutes. Bill left the car in a no parking zone and didn't care. The automatic doors whooshed open. The smell of antiseptic and fear washed over them. Rebecca Sullivan. Bill barked at the reception desk. Emergency admission tonight. The nurse looked up with kind eyes that had seen too much. Family. I'm her father, William Matthews. Third floor, room 307. Dr. Henderson is waiting for you. The elevator ride lasted forever. Margaret held Bill's hand with trembling fingers. He stared at his reflection in the polished steel doors. Still wearing his pajama shirt, hair sticking up everywhere. Looking every one of his 58 years. This morning he'd been planning quarterly board meetings. Right now he was just a terrified father. Dr. Henderson met them outside Rebecca's room. She was younger than Bill expected, maybe 45. Professional but compassionate. Mr. and Mrs. Matthews, Rebecca is awake and asking for you. The baby, Margaret whispered. A girl. Premature but fighting. She's in the NICU. Rebecca named her Hope. Hope. Bill's throat tightened. What happened to my daughter? His voice was deadly quiet. Dr. Henderson glanced around the busy hallway. She led them to a small conference room. Rebecca has 3 cracked ribs, internal bruising, and a severe concussion. The trauma triggered premature labor. Trauma from what exactly? She was struck with a blunt object multiple times. Her husband claims she fell downstairs. Bill's hands slowly clenched into fists. Derek did this to her. I can't make official accusations, Mr. Matthews, but I've been an emergency physician for 20 years. Falls look different from beatings. Margaret made a small, broken sound. Bill pulled her closer. Where is Derek now? Waiting room downstairs, he's been asking about insurance coverage. When Rebecca can be discharged, not asking if his wife was in pain, not worried about his premature daughter, insurance coverage. Can we see Rebecca? Of course, but she's very fragile right now, physically and emotionally. They followed Dr. Henderson down the hallway. Bill's leather shoes squeaked against the linoleum. Everything felt surreal and sharp at the same time. Rebecca looked impossibly small in the hospital bed. 29 years old, but she looked like the little girl who used to crawl into his lap during thunderstorms. Her face was swollen on the left side. A purple bruise spread across her cheek like spilled wine. "Daddy," her voice was barely audible. Bill moved to her bedside carefully. Wires and tubes snaked everywhere. "I'm here, sweetheart. Mom's here too." "I'm sorry." Tears rolled down Rebecca's cheeks. "I'm so sorry for causing trouble." "Sorry for what?" "Baby girl. Derek said no one would believe me if I told anyone. He said I was being dramatic and crazy." Bill's vision went red around the edges. His daughter was apologizing for being beaten nearly to death. "Rebecca, honey, look at me." He took her hand gently. "You have absolutely nothing to be sorry for. Nothing." She nodded, but doubt flickered in her eyes. Years of being told she was wrong. Dramatic. Unstable. "Where's Derek now?" Margaret asked softly. "Downstairs somewhere. He was upset about the hospital bills. Said our insurance doesn't cover this kind of thing." Rebecca's voice was hollow. "He asked if I could just say I fell down the stairs. Keep things simple. Keep things simple." While his wife lay broken and his daughter fought for life in an incubator. Bill stood up abruptly. Margaret grabbed his arm. "Where are you going?" "To find Derek." "Bill, no. Not here. Not now." He looked down at his daughter, bruised and broken in a hospital bed. His granddaughter fighting for every breath somewhere down the hall. "You're right." Bill sat back down. "Not here, but somewhere. Soon." Rebecca squeezed his hand weakly. "Daddy, I need to tell you something important. Derek's been seeing someone else. Victoria Hayes from his work. I found out yesterday and confronted him about it. That's when he..." She touched her swollen face. "He beat you because you discovered his affair. He said I was trying to ruin his life, that I was being jealous and irrational. He grabbed his golf club from the hallway closet and..." Rebecca's voice broke completely. "A golf club." Bill filed that detail away with all the others. "We're going to take care of this, Rebecca. All of it. He said no one would believe me over him. He has a good job and a good reputation. I'm just the emotional pregnant wife who can't handle stress." Bill looked at his daughter. Really looked at her. The way she hunched her shoulders. The automatic apology for existing. The fear in her eyes even here. Even safe. This wasn't the first time Derek had hurt her. This was just the first time it had been bad enough for the hospital. "Rebecca, how long has Derek been hurting you?" She was quiet for a long moment. "He's never actually hit me before last night. But the yelling, the name-calling, controlling everything I do, that started about 2 years ago, right after we got married." 2 years. Bill had missed 2 years of his daughter being systematically destroyed. "I want to see my granddaughter," he said quietly. Dr. Henderson appeared in the doorway as if summoned. "The NICU allows 2 visitors at a time. Would you like me to show you the way?" They walked through sterile hallways and double doors into a world of beeping machines and tiny fighters. Hope Elizabeth Matthews was in isolette number 7. She was so small, barely 3 pounds, covered in wires and tubes, but her tiny chest rose and fell steadily. Her fingers were perfectly formed miniatures. "She's beautiful," Margaret whispered. Bill pressed his palm against the isolette's warm plastic wall. "Hello, sweetheart. I'm your grandpa. I'm going to make sure you and your mama are safe forever. I promise you that." A promise he intended to keep. No matter what it cost Derek Sullivan. Detective James Rodriguez arrived at St. Mary's Hospital at 6:30 a.m., carrying 20 years of experience reading between the lines of domestic violence cases. He'd already seen Derek Sullivan in the waiting room, designer polo shirt, perfectly styled hair, concerned expression that didn't quite reach his eyes, playing the worried husband role for anyone watching. Rodriguez had learned to spot the performance years ago. "Mrs. Sullivan." He knocked gently on Rebecca's door. I'm Detective Rodriguez. I need to ask you some questions about last night. Rebecca looked toward the doorway where Derek had just appeared. My husband's here. He can explain everything that happened. Actually, I'd like to speak with you privately first. Standard procedure in these cases. Derek's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. There's no need for privacy. Detective, we have nothing to hide. Rebecca fell down our stairs last night. Terrible accident. Mr. Sullivan, I need you to wait in the hallway, please. I think I should stay. Rebecca gets confused when she's upset. Pregnancy hormones affect memory and judgment. Rodriguez had heard this exact script dozens of times. The helpful husband who needed to speak for his confused wife. Sir, I need to speak with Mrs. Sullivan alone. Hospital security can escort you to the waiting area if necessary. Derek's mask slipped for just a second. Rodriguez caught the flash of anger before the concerned husband expression returned. Of course, whatever helps Rebecca feel comfortable and safe. After Derek left, Rodriguez pulled a chair close to Rebecca's bed. She looked like a frightened child. Mrs. Sullivan, everything you tell me is completely confidential. You're not in trouble here. I'm here to help you. Derek already explained what happened to everyone. I fell down the stairs. Can you tell me about the fall in your own words? Rebecca's fingers twisted the hospital blanket nervously. I was carrying laundry upstairs to our bedroom. I missed a step somehow and tumbled down, hit my side hard on the wooden banister. Rodriguez had investigated hundreds of domestic violence cases. The story was always too neat, too rehearsed, too simple. What time did this accident happen? Around 10:30 last night, maybe 10:45. Were you and Derek having any disagreements yesterday evening? Rebecca's eyes darted toward the door. No, we don't really fight much. Derek doesn't like drama or conflict. Rodriguez leaned forward slightly. Rebecca, I've been doing this job for a very long time. Falls downstairs leave very specific injury patterns. Your injuries don't match a typical fall. I don't understand what you mean. Multiple blunt force trauma to your ribs and abdomen. Defensive wounds on your forearms where you tried to protect yourself. A facial contusion consistent with being struck directly. These injuries tell a different story than falling downstairs. Rebecca's breathing quickened noticeably. Derek said if I told anyone the real truth, no one would believe me anyway. He said I was being hysterical and dramatic. What is the real truth, Rebecca? She was quiet for almost a full minute. Rodriguez waited patiently. Rushing victims never worked. I found text messages on Derek's phone from a woman named Victoria Hayes. They've been seeing each other for months. Rebecca's voice was barely audible. When I confronted him about the affair, he got really angry. What happened when he got angry? He said I was trying to ruin his life and his reputation, that I was being a jealous, crazy pregnant woman who couldn't handle normal adult relationships. Did Derek hit you then? Not with his hands at first. He pushed me hard against the wall and called me names I can't repeat in front of other people. What happened next? He went to the hall closet and grabbed his golf club. The driver, he said I needed to learn my place and stop snooping through his personal things. Rodriguez felt familiar anger building in his chest. Where did Derek hit you with the golf club? My ribs first. I doubled over from the pain and he hit me again in the back. When I fell down, he kicked me hard in the stomach. Rebecca was crying now. I begged him to stop because of the baby. What did Derek say when you begged him to stop? He said maybe losing the baby would teach me not to snoop through his things and cause problems. Rodriguez had to take a deep breath before continuing. Derek Sullivan had just moved from domestic violence to attempted murder. Rebecca, this isn't the first time Derek has hurt you, is it? The question hung in the air. Rebecca's automatic response would be to deny it, protect him, minimize the abuse pattern. He's never actually hit me before last night, she said very carefully. But he's hurt you in other ways before this. Derek has a temper sometimes. He doesn't like it when I do things wrong or make him look bad in front of other people. What kind of things make Derek angry? If dinner isn't ready exactly when he gets home from work, if I talk too much at parties or company events, if I spend money without asking his permission first. Rebecca wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. He says I'm not very smart about practical things, that I need his guidance to make good decisions. How does Derek provide this guidance? He controls all our bank accounts and credit cards. He checks my phone regularly. He comes home at lunch to make sure I'm where I'm supposed to be. The words came faster now. He chooses my clothes for important events. Says I don't have good judgment about what looks appropriate on me. Rodriguez wrote carefully in his notebook. Classic patterns of emotional and financial abuse. Has Derek ever threatened you directly? Not exactly threatened, but he tells me stories about women who make bad choices. Women who end up alone and broke because they couldn't appreciate good husbands who were trying to help them. Rebecca, I need to show you something important. Rodriguez pulled out his phone. Our technology unit pulled the doorbell camera footage from your neighbor across the street. He played the video on his phone screen. It showed Derek dragging something that clearly looked like a golf club into the house at 10:47 p.m. No laundry basket anywhere. No sign of Rebecca falling down any stairs. This footage directly contradicts Derek's story about you falling. Rebecca stared at the phone screen in shock. He lied to the police officers. Yes, which means Derek knows exactly what he did was wrong and criminal. But Derek's a good man deep down. He has a responsible job. People at work respect him. Rodriguez had heard this desperate defense before too. The victim protecting the abuser even after being nearly killed. Rebecca, good men don't beat their pregnant wives with golf clubs. Period. End of discussion. She was quiet again, slowly processing this radical idea that Derek might not be the victim of her dramatic behavior. Mrs. Sullivan, I need to ask you directly. This really isn't the first time Derek has been violent with you, is it? Finally, the complete truth emerged. Derek's actually hit me twice before tonight. Once when we were dating because I talked to a male coworker at a company party. Once last year when I bought groceries from the wrong store without checking with him first. Rebecca's voice was completely flat now. But those times I probably deserved it somehow. I wasn't being considerate of his feelings. Rebecca, you have never deserved to be hit. Not once. Not ever. Derek says all couples fight sometimes. That I'm too sensitive about normal relationship conflicts. Normal relationship conflicts don't send people to the hospital. Rebecca, Rodriguez's phone buzzed with a text from his partner downstairs with Derek. Subject story changing. Now claims he heard her fall but didn't actually see it happen. Derek was already modifying his lies as the evidence mounted against him. Rebecca, I need to ask you something very important. Are you afraid of Derek right now? Sometimes, when he gets that look in his eyes, like last night when he picked up the golf club, she touched her bruised face gingerly. I really thought he was going to kill me. What stopped him from continuing the attack? I told him the neighbors might hear the noise, that people would ask questions if something serious happened to me. So Derek had stopped not out of remorse or love, but out of pure self-preservation. Rebecca, I'm going to arrest Derek for domestic violence and aggravated assault, but I need you to be completely honest with me about everything. No more protecting him. He said if I ever tried to leave him or cause legal trouble, he'd make sure I lost everything. That no court would give custody to an unstable woman with a history of making false accusations. Derek's been systematically manipulating you. Rebecca, making you believe things about yourself that simply aren't true. But what if he's right about me? What if I really am too emotional and dramatic for normal relationships? Rodriguez leaned forward intently. Rebecca, you're lying in a hospital bed because your husband beat you with a golf club for discovering his affair. You are the victim here, not the problem. Something important shifted in Rebecca's eyes, like she was hearing the words clearly for the first time. I'm not crazy, she said quietly but firmly. No, you're not crazy at all. I know exactly what happened to me last night. Yes, you do know exactly what happened. Derek tried to kill me and my baby because I found out about his girlfriend. That's exactly what happened. Rebecca looked directly at Rodriguez for the first time during their conversation. I want to press full charges against Derek. That's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to take care of this situation completely. As Rodriguez left Rebecca's room, he saw Derek pacing in the hallway with his phone pressed to his ear. I don't care what it costs me, Derek was saying urgently. Find me a lawyer who specializes in this exact kind of situation. The kind of lawyer who wins these cases? Derek Sullivan was already preparing for legal war. Rodriguez smiled grimly as he walked toward the elevator. Derek had no idea what was coming for him. Bill Matthews stood in the hospital parking garage at 7 a.m., watching Derek Sullivan through the windshield of his Mercedes. Derek paced between parked cars, gesturing angrily into his phone. From 50 feet away, Derek looked like exactly what he was. A middle management wannabe in an expensive polo shirt trying to buy his way out of serious consequences. Bill had built a Fortune 500 company from absolutely nothing. He knew predators when he saw them. His phone rang. Frank Morrison, his head of security. "Sir, I have preliminary information on Derek Sullivan." "Go ahead, Frank." 32 years old, middle management at Patterson Marketing, makes $68,000 a year but lives like he makes twice that amount. Significant credit card debt, most of it hidden from his wife. Bill leaned against his car, listening carefully. "What else did you find?" This isn't Derek's first experience with domestic violence charges. Found a restraining order filed by an ex-girlfriend named Amanda Wilson 3 years ago. She dropped all charges 2 weeks later. Why would she drop the charges? Still investigating that angle. But Amanda Wilson suddenly paid off her student loans right after dropping the charges. $43,000 in a single payment. Derek had bought his way out of consequences before. "Frank, I want absolutely everything on this man. Employment history, financial records, every parking ticket, every speeding ticket. I want to know what he had for breakfast on Tuesday." "Yes, sir. Anything else you need immediately?" "Find Amanda Wilson. I want to talk to her personally." "Already working on that, sir." Bill hung up and continued watching Derek. His son-in-law was still on the phone, voice rising even from this distance, even 50 feet away. Bill could see the anger, the entitlement, the complete lack of remorse. This was the man who'd beaten his pregnant daughter with a golf club. Bill's phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. "Rebecca asking for you urgently. Room 307. He took the elevator back upstairs, but stopped at the NICU first. Hope was awake, her tiny eyes tracking movement. A nurse named Janet was adjusting her feeding tube with gentle hands. "How is she this morning?" Bill asked quietly. "Much stronger than yesterday. Babies are natural fighters, especially when they have important reasons to fight for their lives." "What kind of reasons?" "Love, security, knowing someone's going to protect them no matter what." Janet looked at Bill carefully. "This baby's got a grandfather who's going to make sure she's completely safe." "How can you tell that 40 years of nursing premature babies? I can always spot the real protectors." Bill pressed his hand against the isolette's warm surface again. "That's absolutely right, sweetheart. Grandpa's going to take care of everything that needs taking care of." When he reached Rebecca's room, she was sitting up slightly, looking more alert than she had since the attack. Margaret sat in the chair beside her bed, holding her hand. "Daddy, I told Detective Rodriguez everything. About Derek hitting me before. About him controlling our money and checking my phone constantly." Rebecca's voice was noticeably stronger. "I'm pressing full charges against him. That's my brave girl. But I'm scared. Daddy, Derek has connections at his work. He knows important people. What if they don't believe my word against his?" Bill sat on the edge of her hospital bed carefully. "Rebecca, do you remember when you were 7 years old and Jimmy Peterson was bullying you at school? The boy who pushed me off the swing set and called me names? What did I tell you about bullies back then? That bullies count on people being too afraid to fight back against them. And what did we do about Jimmy Peterson? You talked to his father, and then his father's boss, and suddenly Jimmy Peterson wasn't such a tough guy anymore." Bill smoothed Rebecca's hair back from her bruised forehead gently. "Derek Sullivan is just a bigger, older version of Jimmy Peterson. He's counting on you being too afraid to fight back. But what if Derek tries to hurt me again for pressing charges? He won't get the chances, sweetheart." Margaret looked at her husband with concern. "Bill, what exactly are you planning to do?" "I'm planning to be a father and a grandfather. Nothing more, nothing less." His phone buzzed again. Frank Morrison. "Sir, I found Amanda Wilson. She's agreed to meet with you this afternoon. 2 o'clock at the Starbucks on 5th Street. "Thank you, Frank." Rebecca looked curious. "Who's Amanda Wilson?" "Daddy, Derek's ex-girlfriend, the one he beat up 3 years ago. Derek told me she was mentally unstable, that she made up crazy stories about him when he tried to break up with her. What else did Derek tell you about his past relationships? That women always became obsessed with him after dating. That ex-girlfriends would stalk him and make false accusations when he tried to move on with his life." Rebecca frowned thoughtfully. "He said I was different from all the others, more mature and emotionally stable." Bill felt that familiar rage building again. Derek had used the exact same playbook on Rebecca, that he'd used on Amanda Wilson. Isolate, control, abuse, then blame the victim for being unstable. Rebecca, I want you to think about something carefully. In all the time you've known Derek, has he ever taken responsibility for anything going wrong? Rebecca was quiet for a moment, really considering the question. Now that you mention it, no. Everything was always someone else's fault. His boss was incompetent. His coworkers were jealous of his success. I was too emotional or dramatic about normal things. And when Derek hit you last night, he said I made him do it by snooping through his phone and causing problems. Do you see the pattern now? Derek's never wrong about anything, ever. Rebecca's eyes widened with sudden understanding. Oh my God, he really is exactly like Jimmy Peterson. Exactly like Jimmy Peterson, just with better clothes and a bigger vocabulary. Margaret reached for Rebecca's hand again. Sweetheart, why didn't you tell us Derek was hurting you before this? Because I thought it was my fault somehow. Derek's so smart and successful. Everyone at his company respects him. If he was constantly unhappy with me, I figured I must be doing something fundamentally wrong. Bill had heard enough. His daughter had spent 2 years being psychologically destroyed by a man who'd convinced her that abuse was actually love. Where's Derek right now? He asked. Downstairs somewhere. He came up earlier and asked when I could be discharged. He said the hospital bills were going to be really expensive and we needed to get home so I could call our insurance company. Not asking how she felt, not concerned about the baby's condition, worried about money. Did Derek ask about Hope at all? He said she looked underdeveloped and asked if the hospital had made any medical mistakes that might affect our insurance claims. Bill stood up abruptly. Margaret grabbed his arm instinctively. Bill, please don't do anything rash right now. I'm not going to do anything rash. Margaret, I'm going to do something very carefully planned. He kissed Rebecca's forehead tenderly. Get some rest, sweetheart. Focus on getting strong so you can take proper care of Hope. What are you going to do? Daddy, I'm going to have a conversation with Derek. Please don't make things worse for me. Things can't possibly get worse. Rebecca, you're in a hospital bed because your husband tried to kill you and your baby. It's time for things to start getting much better. Bill left the room and found Derek in the waiting area, still on his phone. He approached quietly, catching the end of Derek's conversation. No, I need someone who understands that women like this make completely false accusations when they're emotional. Pregnancy hormones. You know she's not thinking clearly about anything. Derek hung up and turned to find Bill standing directly behind him. Oh, Mr. Matthews, how is Rebecca feeling today? Like someone who was beaten with a golf club. Derek's expression didn't change at all. The fall down the stairs was really terrible. I feel awful that I wasn't there to catch her. Bill stared at Derek for a long moment. There's security footage of you bringing the golf club into the house. Derek, the police have it. Something flickered behind Derek's eyes. Calculation, not guilt or shame, just cold math. There must be some mistake with the timing on that footage. Technology isn't always completely reliable. No mistake. You beat my daughter because she discovered your affair. Mr. Matthews, I understand you're upset about Rebecca's accident, but Rebecca has a tendency to dramatize normal situations. I'm sure when she calms down, she'll remember things more clearly. Bill stepped closer. Derek was taller, but Bill had presence, weight, the kind of authority that came from decades of making decisions that affected thousands of people. Derek, let me be very clear about something. You have hurt my daughter for the absolute last time. Sir, I think you're misunderstanding the entire situation here. I understand perfectly. You're a coward who beats pregnant women. You manipulated my daughter into thinking abuse was love. You isolated her from her family and friends. You controlled her finances and her freedom. Derek's mask was starting to slip. Rebecca's told you her version of events, but there are always two sides to every story. Your side involves a golf club and my daughter in the ICU. Look, Mr. Matthews, I know you're very successful in business. I respect that tremendously. Maybe we can work something out here. Rebecca doesn't need to go through the stress of a trial in her current condition. Derek was offering to buy his way out, just like he had with Amanda Wilson. Work something out. Financial compensation for medical bills. Maybe some kind of arrangement where Rebecca and the baby are taken care of without involving the courts unnecessarily? Bill smiled. It was not a pleasant smile at all. Derek, you have absolutely no idea who you're dealing with. Sir, you think you can buy your way out of this like you did with Amanda Wilson? Derek's face went completely white. I don't know what you're talking about. $43,000. That's exactly what it cost you to make Amanda Wilson drop her restraining order. How did you? I know everything about you, Derek. I know about your gambling debts. I know about your hidden credit cards. I know about your affair with Victoria Hayes. I know you've been planning to leave Rebecca after the baby was born. Derek was breathing faster now. You can't prove any of that. I don't have to prove anything. Derek, I just have to destroy you completely. You're threatening me? I'm promising you. Bill turned and walked away, leaving Derek standing alone in the waiting room. By the time he reached his car, Bill was already planning Derek Sullivan's complete and total destruction. It was going to be thorough. It was going to be legal. And it was going to be absolutely devastating, just like Derek had been to his daughter. But Derek had made one critical mistake. He'd chosen the wrong family to terrorize. Now Derek was going to learn exactly what happened when you declared war on William Matthews. Victoria Hayes sat across from Frank Morrison in a corner booth at Starbucks on 5th Street, her hands wrapped around a coffee cup that had gone cold 30 minutes ago. She was younger than Frank had expected, 26, with the kind of polished professional appearance that screamed middle management ambition. But her eyes were red-rimmed and her perfectly manicured fingers trembled noticeably. Miss Hayes, thank you for agreeing to meet with me on such short notice. I still don't understand what this is about. You said it concerned Derek Sullivan. Frank pulled out his identification folder. I work for William Matthews, Derek's father-in-law. Victoria's face went completely pale. Oh God, Rebecca's father. You know Rebecca. Derek talks about her sometimes. Victoria looked down at her, shaking hands. He said she's been having a really difficult pregnancy. Serious emotional problems? What kind of emotional problems? Jealousy, paranoia, making wild accusations about Derek's friendships at work. Victoria's voice was getting smaller. Derek said pregnancy hormones have made her unstable and irrational. Frank leaned forward slightly. Miss Hayes, Rebecca's in the hospital right now. Derek beat her with a golf club last night. She nearly died. The color drained completely from Victoria's face. That's absolutely impossible. Derek would never hurt anyone. He's the gentlest man I know. When did you last see Derek? Yesterday afternoon. We had lunch together at the deli near our office. Victoria was breathing faster now. He was upset because Rebecca had been going through his phone. He said she was becoming obsessive and controlling. Did Derek tell you what happened when he went home? He texted me around 11 p.m., said Rebecca had fallen down the stairs and he was taking her to the hospital. Frank pulled out his phone and showed Victoria the doorbell camera footage. This is Derek dragging a golf club into his house at 10:47 p.m. Victoria stared at the screen in shock. I don't understand what I'm seeing. Derek lied to you, Miss Hayes. Rebecca didn't fall down any stair. Derek beat her because she discovered your affair. Affair? Victoria looked genuinely confused. Derek and I aren't having an affair. You're not romantically involved with Derek. Derek's married. He loves his wife deeply. He's excited about becoming a father. Victoria was shaking her head. We're friends. We have lunch sometimes. We text about work stuff. Frank pulled out printed copies of text messages his tech team had recovered from Derek's phone. These are messages between you and Derek from the past 3 months. Victoria read the first few messages and her hand flew to her mouth. I never sent these? The messages were explicit, sexual, detailed plans for meetings and intimate encounters. Miss Hayes, these messages came from your phone number. But I never wrote these words. I would never. Victoria was reading faster now, her face growing more horrified with each message. This one says I told Derek I loved him and wanted him to leave his wife. You didn't write that message. I've never said anything like that to Derek, ever. Victoria looked up at Frank. Someone's been sending messages from my phone without my knowledge. How is that possible? Derek set up my new phone for me 2 months ago. He said he was helping me transfer everything from my old phone. Victoria's voice was barely a whisper. He had my phone for an entire weekend. Frank made a note. Derek had been creating evidence of an affair that didn't exist. Miss Hayes, what exactly is your relationship with Derek? We work together. We're friends. Sometimes we have lunch or coffee. Victoria was starting to cry. He talks about Rebecca constantly, how much he loves her, how worried he is about her emotional state during the pregnancy. What does Derek say about Rebecca's emotional state? That she's become paranoid and jealous since getting pregnant, that she accuses him of things that aren't true, that pregnancy hormones have made her completely irrational. Has Derek ever made romantic advances toward you? Never. He's completely devoted to Rebecca. He shows me pictures of the ultrasounds. He talks about what kind of father he wants to be. Frank showed Victoria another set of messages. These were the ones Derek had sent to Rebecca, making it look like Victoria was pursuing him aggressively. Derek sent these messages to his wife, claiming you wrote them. Victoria read the messages and started sobbing. He made me look like some kind of predator, like I was trying to break up his marriage. Miss Hayes, Derek has been manipulating both you and Rebecca, creating fake evidence to make Rebecca think you were having an affair. But why would he do that? So when he beat Rebecca for being suspicious, it would look like she was a jealous, paranoid wife who drove him to violence? Victoria stared at Frank. You're saying Derek planned this whole thing? I'm saying Derek is a very careful predator who creates elaborate justifications for his abuse. But the messages from my phone, how did he send them without me knowing? Spyware. Apps that let someone control your phone remotely. Frank made another note. Derek's been controlling your phone for months, sending messages to himself that you never wrote. Oh my God! Victoria put her head in her hands. Rebecca thinks I stole her husband. Rebecca thinks you've been having an affair with Derek for months. But it's not true. None of it's true. Victoria looked up with sudden understanding. Derek's been lying to both of us this entire time. What else has Derek told you about Rebecca? That she's become suspicious and controlling since getting pregnant, that she checks his phone and follows him sometimes, that she makes embarrassing scenes at company events. Who has Derek shown you evidence of this behavior? Photos of Rebecca sitting in her car outside his office building? Screenshots of her calling him multiple times during important work meetings? Miss Hayes, Derek has been stalking his own wife and taking pictures to make her look unstable? Victoria's face crumpled completely. How could I be so stupid about everything? You weren't stupid. Derek is a skilled manipulator. This isn't your fault at all. But I believed him completely. I felt sorry for him. I thought he was trapped with a crazy wife. That's exactly what Derek wanted you to think. Frank's phone buzzed with a text message. He read it and frowned. Miss Hayes, I need to ask you something important. Has Derek ever asked you to lie for him? Not exactly lie, but he asked me to keep our friendship private because Rebecca gets jealous of his female coworkers. Anything else? He asked me to text him during certain times so he could show Rebecca that I was bothering him at work inappropriately. You've been providing Derek with evidence to use against you. Victoria was crying harder now. I was helping him prove his wife was paranoid about nothing. But the affair was real in Rebecca's mind because of the fake messages. Miss Hayes, Derek beat Rebecca because she confronted him about an affair that never happened. Using evidence Derek created himself. This is completely insane. This is calculated and premeditated. Derek has been setting up this scenario for months. Frank leaned back in his chair. Derek Sullivan was more dangerous than he'd initially thought. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was premeditated psychological warfare. Miss Hayes, would you be willing to help us prove Derek's been manipulating both you and Rebecca? How can I help Hunter wear a recording device? Get Derek to admit what he's been doing. Victoria nodded immediately. Yes, absolutely. That poor woman. She must think I'm a complete monster. Rebecca thinks you deliberately seduced her husband and destroyed her marriage. I have to fix this somehow. I have to help her understand that none of this was real. Frank made a final note in his file. Derek Sullivan had created the perfect crime. Make the victim look crazy, make the witness look guilty, make himself look like the reasonable husband driven to desperate measures. But Derek had made one critical mistake. He'd underestimated William Matthews. And now Derek was about to discover what happened when you hurt the daughter of a man who owned half the city. The meeting with Victoria Hayes ended with her agreeing to cooperate fully. As Frank drove back to brief Bill Matthews, he reflected on Derek's elaborate deception. Derek hadn't just beaten his wife. He'd spent months psychologically torturing her, making her question her own sanity, building a justification for violence that would hold up in court. Derek Sullivan was a sociopath, and Bill Matthews was about to destroy him with the same methodical precision Derek had used to destroy Rebecca. This was going to be very interesting. But first, Frank had to meet with Amanda Wilson, the woman who'd survived Derek Sullivan once before. Amanda Wilson lived in a small apartment complex on the east side of town, the kind of place where people minded their own business and asked very few questions. Frank Morrison had been waiting in his car for 20 minutes when she finally appeared. She was 31, with the careful posture of someone who'd learned to make herself invisible. Her eyes darted around the parking lot before she approached his car. "You said this was about Derek Sullivan." Her voice was steady, but Frank could see her hands shaking. "Yes, ma'am. I work for William Matthews. Derek's current wife is in the hospital." Amanda's face went white. "What happened to her?" "Derek beat her with a golf club. She's 7 months pregnant." Amanda closed her eyes and leaned against the car. "I knew this would happen eventually. I tried to warn people." "Miss Wilson, would you be willing to tell me about your relationship with Derek?" "Not here. Too many people around who might be watching." Amanda looked toward her apartment building nervously. "There's a diner on Maple Street, Murphy's. I'll meet you there in 10 minutes. Frank waited in a back booth at Murphy's Diner, watching Amanda Wilson compose herself at a corner table. When she finally joined him, her coffee cup rattled against the saucer as she set it down. "How badly is she hurt? Cracked ribs, internal bleeding, severe concussion? The baby was born premature." "Jesus Christ." Amanda stared into her coffee. "I tried to warn people about Derek, but nobody believed me. What happened between you and Derek?" "We dated for 18 months. He was charming at first, attentive, made me feel special and important." Amanda's voice was flat, emotionless. "Then slowly he started changing all the rules." "What kind of rules?" "What I could wear, who I could talk to, where I could go without his permission. He said he was protecting me from making bad decisions." Frank made notes as Amanda talked. The exact same pattern Derek had used with Rebecca. "When did the violence start?" "About 6 months into the relationship. I came home from work late because of a mandatory meeting. Derek was waiting in my apartment. He'd let himself in with the spare key I'd given him." "What happened that night?" "He said I was lying about the meeting, that I was probably seeing someone else behind his back. When I tried to show him the work emails proving the meeting was real, he grabbed my phone and threw it against the wall." "Did he hit you that night?" "He pushed me down and held me there while he explained that women like me needed guidance from men like him. He didn't hit me that time, but I knew he wanted to." Frank could see where this was going. Derek escalated slowly, testing boundaries. "When did Derek first hit you?" 3 months later. I had dinner with a female coworker for her birthday. Derek said I was being disrespectful by going out without his permission." "How did Derek find out about the dinner?" "He was tracking my phone. I didn't know until much later, but he'd installed spyware when he offered to fix it after I dropped it." The exact same tactic Derek had used with Victoria Hayes. "Tell me about the night Derek really hurt you." Amanda was quiet for almost a full minute. "I found out Derek was seeing other women, dating them while still with me. When I confronted him about it, he completely lost control." "What did he do?" "Beat me unconscious with a lamp base. I woke up in the hospital with a concussion and a broken wrist." "You filed a restraining order against him?" "Yes. The police were very helpful. They said I had a strong case against him." "But you dropped the charges." Amanda's laugh was bitter. "Derek's very persuasive when he needs to be. How much did he pay you?" $43,000. Exactly enough to pay off my student loans." "Did Derek threaten you?" "He didn't need to threaten me. He explained very calmly what would happen if I went through with the charges." "What would happen?" "He'd destroy my reputation completely, make me look like a vindictive ex-girlfriend who couldn't handle being dumped. He had photos of me that would be embarrassing if they became public." "Photos you'd given him?" "Photos he'd taken without my knowledge. In my apartment, in my bedroom." Amanda's voice was getting smaller. "He said no jury would believe an unstable woman with a history of making false accusations." "False accusations?" "Derek had been setting me up for months, creating incidents where I looked jealous or crazy, then documenting my reactions carefully. Frank looked up from his notes. Can you give me a specific example? He'd flirt with waitresses when we went out to dinner, then act confused when I got upset. He'd take pictures of me crying or arguing and save them as evidence of my emotional instability. He was building a defense case before he ever hit you. Derek's not stupid. He plans everything very carefully and methodically. Frank's phone buzzed. A text from his tech team. Sullivan's financial records ready for review. Miss Wilson, would you be willing to testify about Derek's pattern of behavior? If it would help his wife? Yes, but I need protection. Protection from Derek. Derek doesn't like loose ends. When he found out I was talking to a domestic violence counselor last year, my car was vandalized and my apartment was broken into. You think Derek was responsible? I know Derek was responsible. He sent me a text the next day asking if I was having security problems. Frank made another note. Derek had been intimidating Amanda Wilson for years after their relationship ended. Miss Wilson, one more question. Did Derek ever mention wanting to have children? All the time. He said he wanted a family with a woman who understood her role. Someone more traditional than me. What did he mean by traditional? Submissive, financially dependent, isolated from friends and family. Amanda looked directly at Frank. Derek wanted a victim, not a partner. Frank's phone rang. Bill Matthews. Frank, where are we on the financial investigation? Just finished with Amanda Wilson. Derek's pattern goes back years. I'm heading back to brief you on the financial records now. Good. I want everything ready before Derek realizes what's happening to him. Frank hung up and looked at Amanda Wilson. Miss Wilson, Derek Sullivan is about to learn what happens when he targets the wrong family. What do you mean Derek's current father-in-law owns half this city, and he's not the forgiving type? Amanda smiled for the first time since Frank had met her. Good. Derek's gotten away with this for way too long. He won't get away with it this time. As Frank drove back to brief Bill Matthews, he reflected on Derek's methodology. Amanda Wilson had been a trial run. Derek had perfected his techniques on her, then applied them to Rebecca with even more sophistication. But Derek had made a critical error in judgment. He'd assumed Rebecca's family would be as powerless as Amanda Wilson had been. He was about to discover how wrong that assumption was. Bill Matthews wasn't just angry. Bill Matthews was methodical. And Derek Sullivan was about to become his project. A project that would end with Derek's complete and total destruction. Dr. Sarah Henderson found Bill Matthews in the NICU at 6 a.m., standing beside Hope's isolette with the stillness of a man keeping vigil. Mr. Matthews, you've been here all night. Couldn't sleep. Bill's voice was rough with exhaustion. How is she this morning? Stronger? Her breathing is more stable, and she's responding well to feeding. Dr. Henderson checked Hope's chart carefully. Babies born at 33 weeks usually do very well with proper care. Usually, Hope's case is complicated by the trauma her mother experienced. Maternal stress during pregnancy can affect fetal development. Bill watched his granddaughter's tiny chest rise and fall. What kind of effects? Potentially issues with lung development, nervous system function, immune response. We won't know the full extent for several weeks. Is she in pain right now? We're managing her comfort very carefully. But Mr. Matthews, premature babies are fighters. Hope has every reason to survive and thrive. Bill pressed his palm against the isolette's warm surface. What does she need from us? Time, medical care, and the knowledge that she's safe and loved. She'll have all of that. Dr. Henderson made a note in Hope's chart. Mr. Matthews, can I ask you something? Of course. Have you considered that Hope might benefit from having her father involved in her care? Bill's expression darkened. Derek Sullivan will never be alone with his child. Sir, I understand there are family complications, but research shows that paternal involvement can be important for premature infants. Derek Sullivan beat Hope's mother with a golf club. He told Rebecca that maybe losing the baby would teach her not to snoop through his things. Dr. Henderson stopped writing. He said that, among other things, Mr. Matthews, I need to document that statement for Hope's medical file. Why? If Derek Sullivan expressed indifference or hostility toward this pregnancy, it's relevant to Hope's safety and care planning. Bill pulled out his phone. and showed Dr. Henderson the police report Detective Rodriguez had filed. Derek has shown no interest in Hope except to complain about medical expenses. He asked if the hospital had made any mistakes that might affect insurance claims. Dr. Henderson read the report with growing concern. This is very serious, Mr. Matthews. Yes, it is. Has Derek attempted to visit Hope? Once, yesterday afternoon. He looked at her for about 30 seconds and asked when she could go home. What was his demeanor? Impatient, annoyed, like Hope was an inconvenience rather than his daughter. Dr. Henderson made extensive notes. Mr. Matthews, I'm going to recommend that Derek Sullivan not be allowed unsupervised access to Hope. On what grounds? Medical grounds. Hope is extremely vulnerable right now. She needs a calm, nurturing environment. Based on what you've told me, Derek represents a potential source of stress and instability. Can you do that legally? I can restrict access based on medical necessity. Hope's well-being is my primary concern. Bill felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. Thank you, Dr. Henderson. Mr. Matthews, there's something else you should know. Rebecca has been asking to see Hope, but Derek told her the baby was too sick for visitors. That's not true. Completely false. We encourage maternal bonding as soon as possible. It's beneficial for both mother and baby. Derek's been keeping Rebecca away from her own daughter. Apparently, Rebecca asked me yesterday if Hope was going to die because Derek told her the baby's condition was very serious and that seeing her might be too traumatic for Rebecca in her current emotional state. Bill's hands slowly clenched into fists. Derek was psychologically torturing Rebecca even from her hospital bed. Dr. Henderson, I want Rebecca brought down here as soon as possible. I'll arrange for a wheelchair transport this morning. And I want Derek banned from the NICU completely. I'll have security briefed immediately. Bill's phone buzzed with a text from Frank Morrison. Meet me in the parking garage. Urgent news. Dr. Henderson, thank you for taking care of Hope. Mr. Matthews, can I ask you something personal? Sure. What are you planning to do about Derek? Bill looked at his granddaughter, fighting for every breath in her plastic shelter. I'm going to make sure he never hurts anyone again. Legally, I hope. Everything I'm going to do to Derek Sullivan will be completely legal and completely devastating. Absolutely. Bill found Frank Morrison waiting beside his Mercedes in the parking garage. What's the urgent news, Frank? Derek's financials are much worse than we thought. He's not just hiding debt from Rebecca. He's been stealing from her. How my credit cards opened in her name without her knowledge. A second mortgage on their house that she never signed. He's been forging her signature for months. Bill leaned against his car. How much has he stolen? Close to $80,000. All of it used to cover gambling debts and fund his lifestyle. Gambling debts to whom? Some very unpleasant people. The kind who break legs when they don't get paid. How much does Derek owe them? $120,000. They've been calling his office daily for the past 2 weeks. Bill smiled grimly. Interesting timing. Derek beats his wife right when his gambling creditors are applying serious pressure. Gets worse. Derek took out a $500,000 life insurance policy on Rebecca 6 months ago. Without her knowledge, he forged her signature on the application, listed himself as the sole beneficiary. Bill stared at Frank. Derek was planning to kill Rebecca. Looks that way. With the life insurance money, he could pay off his gambling debts and start fresh. What about Hope? Derek never intended for Hope to survive the attack. The fact that Rebecca lived long enough to get to the hospital wasn't part of his plan. Bill's vision went red around the edges. Derek hadn't just beaten his daughter in a moment of anger. Derek had planned to murder Rebecca and let their unborn baby die. Frank, I want Derek destroyed. Completely, financially, professionally, personally. Yes, sir. Where do you want me to start? His gambling creditors. Let them know Derek's been arrested and won't be able to pay them back. That might get Derek hurt. Sir, that's Derek's problem. What else? His employer? I have documentation of Derek using company time and resources to conduct his affairs and cover up his crimes. Send everything to Patterson Marketing's CEO immediately. Done. What about the forged documents? Turn everything over to Detective Rodriguez. Derek's going to face federal charges for identity theft and fraud. Sir, there's one more thing. What Derek's been telling people at work that Rebecca is mentally unstable and that he's considering having her committed for psychiatric evaluation. Bill's hands clenched into fists again. He's planning to have Rebecca declared incompetent so he can control her finances and get custody of Hope. That appears to be his backup plan if the murder didn't work. Frank, I want you to record every conversation Derek has. I want documentation of every lie he tells. Already in progress. We've got surveillance on Derek 24/7. Good. Now I want you to do something else. Name it. Find Victoria Hayes. I think it's time Derek's alleged mistress learned exactly what kind of man she's been defending. Sir, Victoria Hayes has already agreed to help us. She's willing to wear a wire and get Derek to confess. Perfect. Set it up for this afternoon. Bill's phone rang. Margaret. Bill, Rebecca's asking for you. She wants to see Hope, but Derek told her the baby was too sick for visitors. Derek lied. I'll be right there. Bill hung up and looked at Frank. Derek Sullivan has lied to and manipulated my daughter for the last time. What's the next step? We're going to give Derek exactly what he deserves, which is complete destruction, but we're going to let him destroy himself. As Bill walked back toward the hospital elevators, he reflected on Derek's elaborate plan. Murder disguised as domestic violence, life insurance fraud, identity theft, psychological manipulation designed to make Rebecca look unstable. Derek Sullivan was a predator who'd been hunting his daughter for years. But predators made mistakes when they got greedy. And Derek had just made the biggest mistake of his life. He'd hurt William Matthews' family. Now Derek was about to learn what happened when you declared war on a man who owned half the city. The war was about to begin, and Derek had no idea what was coming for him. Rebecca held Hope for the first time at 11 a.m. on Tuesday morning, sitting in a rocking chair beside the NICU window while machines monitored every breath her daughter took. Hope weighed 2 pounds and 14 ounces. Her skin was translucent, her fingers impossibly small, but her eyes were alert, tracking Rebecca's face with the focus of someone who knew she was finally safe. She's absolutely beautiful, Margaret whispered from the chair beside them. Derek said she looked weird and underdeveloped. Rebecca stroked Hope's tiny hand with one finger. He said I shouldn't get too attached in case something went wrong. Derek's an idiot, Bill said from the doorway. Rebecca looked up at her father. Where is Derek? I haven't seen him since yesterday morning. Derek's busy dealing with some serious complications from his arrest. What kind of complications? Bill pulled up a chair so he was sitting directly across from Rebecca. Sweetheart, there are some things about Derek you need to know. Daddy, I already know he hit me. I already know about the affair. It's much more than that. Rebecca? Bill pulled out a folder Frank Morrison had prepared. Financial records, forged documents, evidence of Derek's elaborate deceptions. Derek's been stealing from you for months. Credit cards opened in your name. A second mortgage on your house. Identity theft. Rebecca stared at the documents. That's my signature. Derek forged it, but it looks exactly like my handwriting. Derek's been practicing forging your signature for months. Rebecca, we found practice sheets in his desk at work. Rebecca's face went white. How much money? $80,000. All of it used to cover gambling debts. Gambling debts. Derek owes $120,000 to some very dangerous people. Margaret leaned forward. Rebecca, did Derek ever mention gambling to you? Never. He said gambling was for weak people who couldn't control their impulses. Bill pulled out another document. Derek took out a life insurance policy on you 6 months ago. $500,000. He's the sole beneficiary. I never signed a life insurance application. Derek forged your signature on that too. Rebecca was quiet for a long moment, processing this information while Hope slept peacefully in her arms. Daddy, are you saying Derek planned to kill me? I'm saying Derek needed $500,000 to pay off his gambling debts, and your life insurance policy was worth exactly that amount. But what about Hope? Derek never intended for Hope to survive. Rebecca started crying silently, tears falling onto Hope's blanket. He was going to kill both of us, but he didn't. Sweetheart, you're both alive. You're both safe. What happens now? Derek's going to face federal charges for identity theft, fraud, attempted murder, and conspiracy. What about the affair with Victoria Hayes? Bill pulled out printed copies of the text messages Frank's team had recovered. Rebecca, there was no affair. What do you mean Derek created fake messages between himself and Victoria? She never sent those texts. Derek was controlling her phone remotely. Rebecca stared at the evidence. None of it was real. Derek spent months creating fake evidence of an affair so that when he beat you for being suspicious, you would look like a jealous, paranoid wife. Victoria Hayes never wanted Derek. Victoria Hayes thought Derek was a devoted husband worried about his emotionally unstable wife. Rebecca's tears came harder now. I hated her. I thought she was stealing my husband. Derek manipulated both of you, sweetheart. So when I confronted Derek about the affair, you were confronting him about something that never happened. Using evidence Derek created himself. Rebecca looked down at Hope. He beat me over a lie. Derek beat you because he's a violent predator who needed an excuse that would hold up in court. How long has he been planning this? Months? Maybe years? Rebecca was quiet for several minutes, just holding Hope and processing the enormity of Derek's deception. Daddy, I feel so stupid. You're not stupid. Rebecca, Derek's a skilled manipulator who's been doing this for years. I should have seen the signs. Derek's job was to make sure you didn't see the signs. He's very good at what he does. What he does, Derek's a predator. Sweetheart, this is how he operates. He finds vulnerable women, isolates them, controls them, and then destroys them when he's done. How many others have there been? We know about Amanda Wilson. There are probably others. Rebecca shifted Hope to her other arm. What's going to happen to Derek? Derek's going to prison for a very long time. Are you sure? Rebecca, Derek committed multiple federal crimes. There's no way he's avoiding prison. But what if he hires a good lawyer? Derek's broke, sweetheart. He can't afford a good lawyer. His family has money. Derek's family disowned him years ago. They know exactly what kind of person he is. Rebecca looked surprised. Derek told me his family loved him, but were jealous of his success. Derek's father is a retired police officer. His mother is a social worker. They stopped talking to Derek after he was arrested for domestic violence 3 years ago. He told me his family was excited about Hope. Derek's been lying to you about everything. Rebecca? Hope stirred in Rebecca's arms, making small sounds. Rebecca adjusted her hold, natural maternal instincts taking over. Daddy, I want to ask you something, but I'm afraid of the answer. Ask me anything. If Derek had succeeded in killing me, would Hope have survived? Bill was quiet for a moment. Dr. Henderson says premature babies born under traumatic circumstances have lower survival rates. So Derek was planning to kill both of us? Yes. Why? Because dead people can't testify against you, and Derek needed the insurance money. Rebecca started crying again. I loved him. I really loved him. I know, sweetheart. How could I love someone who wanted to kill me? Because Derek made sure you only saw the person he wanted you to see. But there were signs. Weren't there things I ignored? Derek's job was to make you ignore those signs. I want to see Victoria Hayes. Bill looked surprised. Why? Because I need to apologize to her. I hated someone who was as much a victim as I was. I'll arrange that meeting. Daddy, can I ask you something else? Of course. Hey, what are you going to do to Derek? Bill smiled grimly. Derek's going to face the consequences of his choices. Legal consequences. Completely legal consequences. But also devastating consequences. Derek Sullivan is about to learn what happens when you target the wrong family. Rebecca looked down at Hope, who was sleeping peacefully despite the chaos surrounding her birth. Good, Rebecca said quietly. Derek deserves whatever happens to him. Yes, he does. Daddy? What a sweetheart. Thank you for protecting us. That's what fathers do. Rebecca, we protect our families. Even when our families make stupid mistakes. Especially then. Rebecca closed her eyes and held Hope closer. For the first time in months, she felt truly safe. Derek Sullivan had made the biggest mistake of his life. He'd hurt William Matthews' daughter. Now Derek was going to pay the price, and the price was going to be everything he had, everything he was, everything he would ever be. Victoria Hayes sat in the parking lot outside Patterson Marketing at 12:30 p.m., wearing a wire the FBI had provided and trying to control her breathing. Detective Rodriguez's voice came through her earpiece. Victoria, remember, just get Derek talking. Let him explain himself. Don't push too hard. What if he suspects something? Derek thinks you're on his side. Use that to your advantage. Victoria walked into Patterson Marketing and found Derek at his desk, looking like a man who was trying very hard to appear normal. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, and there were dark circles under his eyes. Derek, are you okay? I heard about Rebecca's accident. Derek looked up with obvious relief. Victoria, thank God. Finally someone who understands what I'm going through. It must be so difficult for you. You have no idea. Rebecca's in the hospital making all these crazy accusations. She's telling people I hurt her on purpose. Victoria sat down in the chair across from Derek's desk. That's terrible. But Rebecca's been unstable for months, right? Exactly. Pregnancy hormones have made her completely irrational. Now she's claiming I beat her with a golf club. A golf club, that's crazy. I know, right? Rebecca fell down the stairs. I wasn't even home when it happened. Victoria leaned forward with apparent concern. Derek, are you sure about the timeline? Because I thought you texted me from home when it happened. Derek's expression flickered almost imperceptibly. I got home right after she fell. She was lying at the bottom of the stairs. That must have been terrifying for you. It was. But now Rebecca's father is trying to turn this into some kind of criminal case. What do you mean? William Matthews thinks he can use his money and influence to railroad me. He's hired private investigators to harass me. That's awful. What are they investigating? Nothing? Everything. They're trying to make my relationship with you look inappropriate. Victoria's pulse quickened. Our relationship. You know what I mean. Our friendship. The lunches we've had. The text messages. Derek, about those text messages. What about them? Some of them were pretty explicit. I don't remember sending messages like that. Derek's eyes sharpened. Victoria, what are you saying? I'm saying I never wrote some of those messages. The ones where I supposedly told you I loved you and wanted you to leave Rebecca. Victoria, you've been under a lot of stress at work. Maybe you don't remember everything clearly. I would remember telling a married man I loved him. Derek. Look, Victoria, I understand why you might want to distance yourself from me now. This situation with Rebecca is complicated. It's not about distancing myself. It's about the truth. Derek stood up and closed his office door. Victoria, I need you to understand something. Rebecca is trying to destroy me. She'll say anything to make me look bad. Even if that's true, I still didn't send those messages. Someone had to send them. Maybe someone with access to my phone? Derek was quiet for a moment. Victoria, what are you implying? I'm not implying anything. I'm stating a fact. I didn't send those messages. Then how do you explain them? You tell me. Derek, you're the one who set up my new phone. Derek's mask started to slip. I helped you transfer your data. That's all. Did you install any apps on my phone? Just the standard stuff. Email, calendar, messaging. What about tracking apps? Why would I install tracking apps? To monitor my location. To send messages from my phone without my knowledge. Derek sat back down. His expression completely different now. Calculating. Cold. Victoria, I think you're confused about a lot of things. Am I confused about Rebecca being in the hospital? Rebecca had an accident. With a golf club. Rebecca fell down the stairs. Derek, I saw the security footage. Derek went very still. What security footage? The doorbell camera from across the street. It shows you bringing a golf club into your house at 10:47 p.m. That footage could show anything. Technology isn't reliable. It's reliable enough for the police. Derek stood up again, pacing behind his desk. Victoria, whose side are you on here? I'm on the side of the truth. The truth is that Rebecca is a mentally unstable woman who's trying to destroy me because I want a divorce. Is that why you took out a life insurance policy on her? Derek stopped pacing. How do you know about that? Because I know about all of it. Derek, the forged signatures, the hidden debt, the gambling. Who told you about the gambling? Does it matter? Derek sat down heavily. Victoria, you don't understand the pressure I've been under. What kind of pressure? Financial pressure. Rebecca spends money we don't have. She's driving us into bankruptcy. Rebecca doesn't control your finances. Derek, you do. She doesn't understand how expensive it is to maintain our lifestyle. What lifestyle you live in a modest house and drive a 10-year-old car? The baby was going to make everything worse. More expenses we couldn't afford. Victoria felt sick. Derek, are you saying you hurt Rebecca because of money? I'm saying Rebecca's pregnancy was poorly timed. Poorly timed for what? For my financial situation. So you decided to solve your financial problems by killing your pregnant wife? Derek looked directly at Victoria for the first time since she'd started asking hard questions. I decided to solve my problems the only way I could. By committing murder, by eliminating complications. Victoria stared at Derek, finally seeing him clearly. You really were planning to kill Rebecca. Rebecca was going to leave me eventually. Take half of everything. Demand child support I couldn't afford. It was easier to handle things my way. Your way, clean, simple. One incident that solved all my problems. Except Rebecca survived. That was unexpected. And now you're facing murder charges. Derek's expression hardened completely. Now I'm facing a lot of complications I didn't plan for. Like William Matthews. William Matthews thinks his money makes him untouchable. He's about to learn otherwise. What do you mean? I mean rich men have just as much to lose as poor men. Sometimes more. Victoria felt a chill run down her spine. Derek, are you threatening Mr. Matthews? I'm stating a fact. Wealthy men often have secrets they don't want exposed. What secrets? Business practices, financial arrangements, personal indiscretions. You're planning to blackmail Rebecca's father. I'm planning to level the playing field. Derek, Mr. Matthews hasn't done anything wrong. Everyone's done something wrong. Victoria, some people are just better at hiding it. Victoria realized that Derek was completely detached from reality. In his mind, he was the victim. Everyone else was the problem. Derek, do you feel any remorse about what you did to Rebecca? Remorse for what? For beating her with a golf club? For trying to kill her and your baby? Derek was quiet for a long moment. Rebecca made her choices. Victoria, I made mine. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're going to get. Victoria stood up to leave. Derek, I think you need professional help. I think I need new friends. People who understand loyalty. I was loyal to you until I realized what you really are. And what am I? A monster. Derek smiled for the first time during their conversation. If that's what it takes to win, Victoria, then that's what I am. Victoria left Derek's office and walked quickly to her car. Detective Rodriguez was waiting in the parking lot. Did you get everything? Victoria asked. Every word. Derek just confessed to premeditated murder on tape. He's completely insane. No, Victoria, Derek's completely sane. That's what makes him so dangerous. 2 hours later, Derek Sullivan was arrested at his desk at Patterson Marketing in full view of his colleagues and news cameras. Derek Sullivan, you're under arrest for attempted murder, domestic violence, identity theft, fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. Derek's carefully constructed mask finally shattered completely. This is ridiculous. I want my lawyer. You'll have that opportunity, Mr. Sullivan. My wife is mentally unstable. She's making false accusations. Mr. Sullivan, we have your confession on tape. Derek's face went white. What confession? Your conversation with Victoria Hayes. You admitted planning to kill your wife to solve your financial problems. Within hours, the arrest footage was on every news station. Derek's gambling creditors received anonymous tips about his arrest. His employer fired him immediately. His assets were frozen. By evening, Derek Sullivan had lost everything. 6 months later, Rebecca Matthews stood at the podium in the community center, looking out at women who had come to hear her speak at the Domestic Violence Survivors Support Group. Hope Elizabeth Matthews, now a healthy 8-month-old baby, sat in Margaret's arms in the front row. My name is Rebecca Matthews. 6 months ago, I was lying in a hospital bed, beaten unconscious by the man who promised to love me. Today, I'm here to tell you that survival is possible. Derek was serving 28 years in federal prison. All appeals denied. Rebecca had returned to college, planning to become a domestic violence counselor. She was dating carefully, a kind man named David who understood that love meant building someone up, not tearing them down. Derek told me no one would believe me, but someone always will. There are people trained to help, trained to protect you. Her phone buzzed with a text. Hi, this is Jennifer. I was at your talk tonight. I've been married to my abuser for 8 years. I think I'm ready to leave. Can you help me? Rebecca typed back immediately. Yes, tell me your story. I believe you, because that's what survivors did. They saved each other. Derek was locked in a cage. Rebecca was free. And that freedom was something Derek could never take away again. Justice hadn't just been served. Justice had transformed into something bigger. Protection for other women from men like Derek Sullivan. Rebecca Matthews had won. Completely. Forever. If Rebecca's story moved you, if you believe survivors deserve justice, show your support by hitting that like button. Your engagement helps stories like this reach women who need to hear them. Share this with someone who needs to know they're not alone. Comment below if you've ever recognized yourself in Rebecca's experience. Your words could save a life. And subscribe with notifications on, because every week we bring you true stories of courage, survival, and justice that remind us all you're stronger than you know. Remember, if you're in an abusive situation, you deserve better. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is always available. You matter. Your story matters. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. Until next time, stay strong. Welcome to our channel. In this captivating story, a broke waitress shares her very last meal with a wandering stranger, only to discover later that he's a secret millionaire. The most surprising action occurs at the end, when everything she sacrificed comes back to her in a way she never imagined. Curious how this unfolds? You'll have to listen to the entire narrative to see how their unlikely bond transforms both their lives forever. If you're as intrigued as we are by these twists and turns, be sure to subscribe to our channel right now. By subscribing, you'll be the first to hear more emotional, uplifting, and unexpected stories just like this one. We'd also love to hear your personal thoughts. Drop a comment below on what you predict for the ending or where you prefer to tune in. Your feedback and support help our channel grow. Ava Morrison had never thought of herself as particularly extraordinary. In fact, if she were being completely honest, most of her life had been defined by struggle, routine, and the unshakable sense that she was on the losing side of a battle no one else seemed to notice. Late one rainy evening, as she stood behind the counter at Judy's Diner, an old-fashioned place off a nearly deserted highway in rural Idaho, Ava couldn't help but let her mind wander to how she had arrived at this point. The building itself was nothing fancy. A worn neon sign flickered outside, its glow partially obscured by sheets of cold, driving rain. Inside, the air smelled of strong coffee, frying bacon, and a hint of bleach left over from mopping the floors for what felt like the third time that day. A couple of regulars sat at their usual tables, nursing cups of coffee and occasionally munching on pie, but the place was nearly empty. Ava's uniform, light blue with white trim, had seen better days just like the rest of her meager wardrobe. She tugged at her apron, feeling the weight of her last few singles in her pocket. Rent was overdue again, and she still had to worry about her mother, Doris, who relied on expensive medication Ava struggled to afford. Doris had been confined to a pull-out couch in their cramped studio apartment for weeks, too ill to work or even go outside for a breath of fresh air. Whenever Ava's thoughts drifted toward her mother's frail condition, a tightness would seize her chest, reminding her that she had precious few options. An old clock near the register ticked loudly, its seconds echoing in the stillness of the near-empty diner. Ava wiped her damp palms on her apron, counting the minutes until closing time. She planned to take home a small plate of leftover eggs and hash browns, her only real meal of the day, so she could have enough strength to finish her double shift tomorrow. She never imagined that a single act of kindness that night would change her destiny. A gust of frigid wind rattled the door just before a man entered, bringing the scent of damp asphalt and desperation with him. He was tall, with broad shoulders that looked as though they once carried confidence, but now his eyes were hollow, his cheeks sunken, and his clothes torn. Rainwater dripped from his disheveled hair onto the scratched linoleum floor. The flickering fluorescent light illuminated his anxious expression as he scanned the diner's sparse interior. No one else paid him much attention. The few customers in the diner were too engrossed in their own woes. Ava, however, felt a twist in her gut. She had seen this look before, an unmistakable plea for help that surpassed mere hunger. Instinctively, she grabbed a clean towel to offer the newcomer, though she doubted it would do much to warm him up. In a voice that wavered between politeness and genuine concern, she said, "Welcome to Judy's Diner. Anywhere you'd like to sit?" The man's eyes flicked toward her for a moment, a silent acknowledgement that he had been noticed. He cleared his throat, lips parted as if to speak, but no words formed. Standing there drenched and exhausted, he hesitated before approaching the worn stool directly across from Ava at the counter. His shoulders slumped slightly, as though even the act of walking a few steps drained what little energy he had left. She could see every micro-expression on his face, from the tension in his jaw to the flicker of relief that crossed his features when he realized someone cared enough to greet him. His voice, when it finally emerged, was rough from either disuse or sorrow, or both. I don't have any money," he managed, "but I'm starving." A sudden hush seemed to fall over the diner, as if even the soft hum of the ventilation system paused to listen. Ava's heart clenched. She had been taught from a young age that it cost nothing to be kind, but the reality of her own circumstances weighed heavily on her. The landlord, Mr. Jefferson, had knocked on her apartment door just that morning to remind her, yet again, that rent was overdue. Those final $5 in her pocket were all she had left for the week, and she had planned to use them sparingly for a few groceries or Doris's next round of medication. Nevertheless, Ava understood the agony of going hungry. She remembered the days when she had first started working at Judy's Diner, skipping her own meals so she could take home scraps for her mother. The memory of that gnawing emptiness lingered, and she felt an empathic pang for this stranger. With a small nod, she reached under the counter where she'd placed a plate of food, the same meal she intended to have for dinner once her shift ended. It was simple fare: scrambled eggs, toast, and a small portion of fried potatoes, already going lukewarm under a heat lamp. Without waiting for him to ask again, she placed the plate before him. The man stared at it, momentarily disbelieving, then met her gaze with eyes full of gratitude and something else. Shame, perhaps, at being reduced to accepting the charity of a stranger. He lifted his fork as if it were forged from precious metal and took a tentative bite, as though half expecting someone to snatch the food away. But no one did. Encouraged, he ate faster, words failing him as the meal disappeared in minutes. Ava pretended to busy herself by refilling salt shakers and straightening the sugar packets, giving him space. The tension in her back lingered, though. She worried. What if he was dangerous or had ulterior motives? She'd seen enough late-night oddities to know that not everyone entering a deserted diner at this hour came with good intentions. Yet as she glanced back at him, she sensed no threat. Instead, she saw the weariness of a man who hadn't had a break in a very long time. Eventually, the stranger put his fork down and rubbed the back of his neck, avoiding eye contact. "I can't thank you enough for this," he mumbled. The overhead light caught the dark scruff on his jaw, highlighting the sunken planes of his face. He was relatively young, maybe early 30s, she guessed, but life had clearly taken a toll. Ava offered a small nod. "You needed it more than I did," she said simply, though the emptiness in her own stomach churned at the thought that she might not get another full meal until tomorrow night. Silence expanded between them, underscored by the steady drip of rain against the diner's windows. The man inhaled deeply, his gaze drifting to the neon sign outside, its flickering red glow casting dancing shadows on the damp pavement. When he finally spoke again, his voice held a resolute edge. "I promise I'll repay you somehow," he said, meeting her eyes directly this time. Ava mustered a gentle smile. "You don't owe me anything," she replied, fully meaning it. She'd often found that small, compassionate deeds carried their own reward in knowing she'd done the right thing. But for this man, it seemed, the significance was deeper. Something about her simple generosity had penetrated whatever armor he'd been wearing. After a few more minutes of loaded quiet, he tugged his threadbare jacket tighter around himself and stood. "Thank you," he said again, his voice trembling slightly. "My name is Gavin Royce. I won't forget this night, Ava." She only realized he'd seen her name stitched on her waitress tag when he tapped it lightly. "Take care, Gavin," she whispered, her tone sincere. Then he was gone, vanishing into the downpour as the diner door chimed behind him. When Ava locked up Judy's Diner that night, the memory of Gavin's hollow stare clung to her like a persistent shadow. she trudged home, arriving at the cramped apartment complex that was little more than a series of dingy rooms stacked atop each other. The hallway lights flickered ominously, and the faint smell of mildew made her wrinkle her nose. Her unit was at the end, next to a door that always hung slightly ajar despite multiple complaints to the landlord. Inside, a single light bulb dangled from the ceiling in the makeshift living room that merged seamlessly with the kitchen. Doris Morrison, Ava's mother, lay on the sagging couch, her gray hair spread across a flattened pillow. She stirred when Ava entered, her eyes fluttering open with visible effort. "You're home late again," Doris remarked quietly, her once strong voice reduced to a weary rasp. Ava tried to smile. "There was a short rush," she lied, not wanting to burden her mother with the truth that the diner had been nearly empty, except for a starving stranger she'd given her dinner to. She set her purse and jacket on the only chair in the room before kneeling by the couch. Doris reached for her daughter's hand, her grip far weaker than it used to be. "Did you eat, sweetheart?" she asked, concern etched into her features. Ava hesitated, her stomach growling softly in traitorous acknowledgement of its emptiness. "I had something small," she fibbed, determined to protect her mother from guilt. The last thing Doris needed was another worry on her plate, especially considering the bills and medication costs that already weighed heavily on Ava's mind. The night passed fitfully for Ava, her dreams haunted by the image of Gavin's grateful eyes and the gnawing uncertainty of how she would pay next month's rent, let alone the overdue portion. When morning arrived, she woke to find that her mother was feeling too weak to even stand. Doris's medication supply was alarmingly low, a reality that filled Ava with dread. Instead of diving into despair, Ava mustered the courage to keep going. She put on a brave face, did what she could for her mother, and went off to handle a double shift at Judy's diner. The hours dragged on, punctuated by the sizzle of bacon, the roar of the old coffee machine, and the occasionally hostile calls from Mr. Jefferson demanding payment. By the end of her shift, exhaustion weighed on her eyelids like cinder blocks. She was wiping the last of the tables that evening, ready to close up again, when Betty, the diner's manager, bustled in with the day's mail. "Ava, there's something here for you," Betty said, handing her a thick envelope made of expensive linen paper. Ava rarely got mail, bills and eviction notices aside, so she opened it curiously. Inside was a first-class plane ticket to Los Angeles, leaving the following morning, along with a note on crisp stationery. "You fed me when you had nothing. Meet me at this address. G. Royce." Ava's heart hammered against her rib cage. Los Angeles? Why on earth would Gavin invite her to California? Was this some sort of elaborate joke? She recalled his parting words at the diner. "I won't forget this night, Ava." Despite her wariness, a spark of curiosity and hope flickered. After all, what did she have to lose by at least exploring this strange invitation? The only barrier was the plane ticket's departure time, barely 24 hours away. Grasping that elegant note in her trembling hand, Ava stared at the bold letters spelling G. Royce. This might be the break she so desperately needed. Could it truly be? For a moment, she imagined a world where her mother got the medicine she needed, and they no longer lived in squalor. Even if it turned out to be a dead end, the possibility was enough to make her heart skip. The next day, Ava boarded a plane for the first time in her life. Anxiety twisted in her stomach as she navigated the airport, checking in the single battered suitcase she owned. She had barely managed to leave behind enough of her tips to cover Doris's basic necessities for a few days. A neighbor, an older woman named Rosalind, had agreed to look after her mother while Ava was gone. The cramped cabin seat felt surreal as the plane ascended, leaving the Idaho plains behind. She couldn't help the swirl of thoughts. What if this is a trap? What if Gavin isn't who he claims to be? Yet something about his eyes and the sincerity of his note convinced her to take the gamble. When she landed in Los Angeles, the sun was beating down on the tarmac, a stark contrast to Idaho's chilly rain. She stepped outside to find a private car waiting for her. A sleek black sedan with tinted windows. The driver, a soft-spoken man in a crisp suit, loaded her suitcase and offered her a polite nod. "Miss Morrison?" he asked, confirming her identity. With a hesitant nod, she slid into the back seat. Traffic was intense, the highways like pulsating veins through a vast concrete sprawl. Eventually, they left the congestion behind. winding up a hillside lined with tall, swaying palm trees and gated mansions. Her nerves spiked when they stopped in front of an iron gate flanked by manicured hedges. The ornate sign read Royce Estate, the letters in shimmering gold. The driver pressed a button, the gate swung open, and the car traveled up a curving driveway leading to a palatial white mansion. Ava's breath caught in her throat. Massive arched windows reflected the brilliant California sky, and a fountain, complete with carved angelic figures, sprayed water into the warm air. Stepping out of the car, she felt a wave of disbelief. How was any of this real? She clutched her purse tightly, feeling out of place in her modest floral dress and secondhand flats. Before she could even ring the doorbell, the enormous wooden doors swung open to reveal Gavin Royce, looking vastly different from the desperate stranger who had stumbled into Judy's diner. Gone were the tattered clothes and hollow cheeks. He wore a tailored navy blazer over casual slacks, exuding understated confidence rather than showy opulence. Yet when their eyes met, Ava saw the same depth in his gaze, the same person who had stood before her in that small-town eatery, famished and vulnerable. "Welcome," he said softly, stepping aside to let her enter the grand foyer. The interior was just as impressive, dominated by a sweeping staircase and a crystal chandelier that sparkled like 1,000 tiny suns. "This must be a lot to take in," Gavin added, noticing her wide-eyed stare. "But I've been waiting for you. I wanted to show you that I kept my promise. I haven't forgotten what you did." Ava swallowed, her mouth suddenly dry. Her life in Idaho felt a million miles away. All at once, she remembered her mother sleeping in a cramped apartment, the smell of bleach and fryer grease clinging to her apron. She found it hard to reconcile that reality with the opulence before her. How did you end up with all this?" she managed to ask, gesturing at the polished marble floors and oil paintings. Gavin's lips quirked into a bittersweet smile. "I wasn't always rich. In fact, there was a time I was worse off than when you found me. Life can be unpredictable, Ava." He walked further inside, motioning for her to follow. "I want to explain everything. Will you let me?" Heart pounding, Ava nodded. "Yes," she said, the word trembling in the space between them. Gavin led her into a sprawling sitting room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a luscious garden. Beyond that, an infinity pool glittered under the late afternoon sun, reflecting the palm trees and pastel sky. Ava perched on the edge of a leather sofa, trying not to fidget as Gavin settled across from her. He steepled his fingers, his posture tense, as if preparing to reveal a deeply guarded secret. "You're probably wondering why I was in that diner with no money and no hope," he began, exhaling slowly. "The truth is, a few years ago, my entire life fell apart. I lost my job, my home, and nearly every friend I thought I had. It's a long story, but let's just say I took a gamble on a business venture that went south. Next thing I knew, I was homeless, wandering from town to town, too proud, or maybe too ashamed, to ask for help." Ava's mind spun. How did a homeless man transform into the occupant of a mansion like this? Sensing her question, Gavin continued, "I eventually found a mentor, an older man, who had started a small tech company. He was on the verge of bankruptcy himself, but he saw potential in me. Or maybe he just took pity. Either way, he offered me a room in his rundown condo and a chance to rebuild my life. Over time, I poured every ounce of energy and skill I had into helping that company survive. It turned out we were onto something big, an idea that revolutionized an entire software niche." He paused, running a hand through his neatly cropped hair. "Luck, timing, and a lot of sleepless nights propelled the company to success. And when it finally hit the market, we were inundated with buyout offers worth millions. I used my shares to launch Royce Technologies, investing in startups that had the same potential for transformation. Eventually, that's how I amassed the fortune you see now." Ava blinked, absorbing the story. "But then, why were you broke again when you came into Judy's diner?" she asked gently, recalling how disheveled and desperate he had appeared. His eyes flickered with regret. "That night, I was in the middle of investigating what I suspected was fraudulent activity in one of my newer acquisitions. I'd gone under the radar, trying to blend in, following leads in small towns across the country. I left my wallet, phone, everything behind so no one could trace me or bribe me. It was meant to be a short trip, but it spiraled out of control. I got stranded. Then the storm hit, I missed my contact, and the next thing I knew, I was walking into your diner, hungry and soaked to the bone. Ava stared at him, the pieces clicking into place. The depth of the lengths he'd gone to remain anonymous made sense now. Still, she couldn't wrap her head around the fact that this man, who had devoured a plate of scrambled eggs and toast with desperate hunger, was the same polished figure that sat across from her in an opulent mansion. "So, you called me here because I gave you that meal?" she ventured, feeling a knot tighten in her chest. Gavin leaned forward, sincerity spilling from his gaze. "Not just because you gave me food, Ava, but because you did it without expecting anything in return, even though you clearly had almost nothing yourself. I've met plenty of people with wealth beyond measure who would never extend that kind of kindness. You reminded me of the person who once helped me at my lowest point, and I can't just forget that." She swallowed hard, recalling how natural it had felt to push her plate toward him. "Kindness doesn't cost anything," she whispered. "But it's not always easy, especially when you're broke." He nodded, eyes glistening. "I want to give you an opportunity," he said. "I'm not talking about a quick handout or a mere charity check. I want to offer you the chance to build a future. Come work with me at Royce Technologies, or, better yet, let me mentor you in the same way my mentor taught me. Whatever you need, your mother's medical care, a better living situation, I can help." Ava's pulse pounded. The offer was staggering. A flurry of emotions battled inside her: hope, fear, excitement, and the daunting awareness of stepping into a world so unlike her own. She spent the next few days at Gavin's estate, grappling with an inner storm of second-guessing and astonishment at how drastically life could shift. Each morning, Gavin introduced her to the basics of the tech industry, guiding her through investor pitch decks and financial reports. It was all Greek to Ava at first. She had never even taken a single business course in her life. Still, there was something invigorating about learning, especially under the mentorship of someone who'd once been on the brink of ruin himself. In the evenings, they walked through the estate's gardens, which were filled with exotic flowers and neatly trimmed hedges. Aviary-like bird calls echoed in the twilight, and the soft fragrance of jasmine accompanied their conversations. For the first time, Ava felt the stirrings of genuine possibility, that maybe this wasn't just a fleeting fantasy. Perhaps she could belong here in some capacity, if not forever, then at least long enough to secure a better life for her mother. However, as her immersion in Gavin's circle deepened, so did her awareness of a harsh reality. Money may change circumstances, but it doesn't automatically change prejudices. She overheard staff whispers about her background, mocking the idea that a small-town waitress with no formal education could possibly grasp the complexities of high-stakes tech and investments. Gavin tried to shield her from the naysayers, but these whispered insinuations found their way to her ears regardless, gnawing at her confidence. One afternoon, Gavin took Ava to Royce Technologies' main headquarters, a sleek 40-story skyscraper downtown. Up on the top floor sat Gavin's personal office, bathed in natural light from floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the city. The office was ultra-modern, with minimalist furniture and abstract art. Ava couldn't stop fiddling with the hem of her blouse, feeling out of place among the polished executives and staff. He introduced her to a few key employees, explaining that Ava might take on an assistant role, partly to learn, partly to help. Most offered polite smiles, but she could sense the doubt lurking behind their eyes. One woman in particular, impeccably dressed in a designer suit, eyed Ava's secondhand shoes with barely concealed disdain. Ava struggled to keep up with the conversations brimming with tech jargon and financial lingo. Words like scalability, ROI, and market penetration flew at her like confetti in a windstorm. Determined, she jotted down notes in a cheap notebook she'd brought from Idaho. As challenging as it was, she refused to let her uncertainty overshadow the opportunity Gavin was giving her. But it wasn't just the complicated terminology that daunted her, it was the culture itself. Evening social gatherings blurred into business dinners, where she was expected to navigate fine dining etiquette. She once nearly sipped from her water glass at the same moment the room observed a toast with champagne, drawing a few half-concealed smirks from others. Each slip-up felt like confirmation of the whispers that she was an imposter. Late one night, after a particularly grueling day of meetings, Ava stayed behind in the nearly deserted 40th floor office to practice reading financial documents. The overhead fluorescent lights buzzed softly, emphasizing the otherwise silent corridor. Her eyes burned from strain. Suddenly, she felt a gentle hand on her shoulder. She turned to find Gavin standing there. Tie loosened, concern etched across his face. "You should go home," he said, his voice low and comforting. "You've been at this for hours." Ava looked at the piles of papers. "I can't. I need to prove." "Prove what?" he interrupted. "That you're good enough to be here? Because I already know that, Ava." Tears pricked her eyes at his unwavering belief in her. "It's not just you," she admitted, swallowing the lump in her throat. "I want to believe it for myself." The pivotal moment arrived when Gavin invited Ava to a high-profile gala, a fundraiser and networking event for philanthropists, CEOs, and major stakeholders in the tech industry. He assured her this would be a chance to see another side of the world she was stepping into, to meet potential mentors and glean more about how powerful alliances were formed. The invitation alone felt surreal to Ava, who had spent most of her life wearing a polyester diner uniform. Now she found herself being fitted for an evening gown, financed by Gavin, which made her blush with a mix of gratitude and embarrassment. The venue was a glittering ballroom in an upscale hotel, where crystal chandeliers rained refracted light onto polished marble floors. Ava glided in on Gavin's arm, nerves jangling with every step. Her midnight blue dress, elegant yet simple, complemented Gavin's sleek tuxedo perfectly. All around them, waiters circulated with trays of champagne flutes and canapes that looked more like miniature works of art than edible bites. The hum of genteel laughter and classical music filled the air. For the first half hour, Ava clung to Gavin's side like a lifeline as he introduced her to business associates. Most were polite, although a few made thinly veiled comments that stung. Remarks like, "Oh, how intriguing that you started in the service industry," were followed by polite chuckles that belied condescension. She made polite conversation, asked a couple of questions, and felt a surge of determination to hold her own. That determination wavered, however, when she overheard a snippet of dialogue from two women standing near the bar. They had their eyes on Ava, sizing her up like an exotic creature on display. "Did you hear she used to be a waitress?" one said, her meticulously plucked eyebrow arching. "Yes," the other replied, swirling her champagne. "Gavin must be feeling charitable these days." Their laughter sliced through Ava's self-confidence. She excused herself, wandering onto a balcony that overlooked a sprawling cityscape of glittering lights. In the cool evening air, she rested her arms on the railing, trying to catch her breath. "Maybe they're right," she thought. "I'm just a waitress in a borrowed gown." A few minutes later, she sensed Gavin's presence behind her. His hand gently touched her shoulder. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low with concern. She let out a shaky breath. "I don't belong here," she admitted, her eyes fixed on the glowing skyline. "I might be able to learn business skills, but I can't change where I come from." Gavin was silent for a moment, then stepped beside her. "You think I fit in here?" he asked quietly. Ava looked at him in surprise. "You're Gavin Royce," she said as if it were self-evident. He let out a humorless laugh. "I wasn't always. Sometimes I still feel like I'm that guy scrounging for a place to sleep. This mansion, these events. Part of me wonders if it's all just temporary." He turned toward her, his gaze intense. "But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that belonging isn't about background. It's about who you choose to be and who stands beside you." Tears welled in her eyes and she fought to keep them from spilling over. He believes in me, she realized. More than that, he saw her as an equal, someone who had earned her spot, not merely a charity case. For a moment, under the glow of the moon and city lights, Ava leaned her head against Gavin's shoulder, letting the warmth of his presence drive away the sting of those hurtful comments. She recalled one of the life lessons her mother used to repeat when she was younger. "It's not where you start that matters, it's where you decide to go." But no matter how comforting those words sounded, Ava was also aware of her mother's precarious situation back in Idaho. Doris's health was not improving, and as much as she yearned for a better life, Ava couldn't simply abandon her mother. Over the next few days, the future became a haze of conflicting emotions. Gavin, ever patient, urged Ava to invite Doris to California and promised top-tier medical care. Yet Doris, set in her ways and wary of big changes, hesitated to move out of Idaho. During one emotional phone call, Doris insisted she didn't want to be a burden, urging Ava to stay in Los Angeles and seize the opportunity. Torn between two worlds, Ava found her nights sleepless, her days filled with repeated questions she had no answers for. She wanted to succeed alongside Gavin, to build a new life where she could leverage kindness and ambition to rise above her meager origins. But each time she pictured her mother alone in that cramped apartment, the pit in her stomach deepened. One afternoon, she made a choice, one that felt both right and terribly painful. As Gavin was discussing an upcoming investment deal, Ava asked if they could talk privately. He saw the seriousness in her eyes, the strain pinching the corners of her mouth. Leading her into an empty conference room, he shut the door. "I'm going back to Idaho," she announced, tears already pooling in her eyes. Gavin's face fell. "Why?" She took a deep breath. "Because my mother can't move here, at least not now. I can't just leave her behind. She needs me, and I won't abandon her." Her words came out in a shaky rush, a mixture of resolve and heartbreak. For a moment, Gavin looked stricken, like she had physically struck him. Then he nodded, his posture heavy with acceptance. "I understand," he said, managing a faint smile. "Family is everything. Nahun." Over the next 24 hours, Ava packed her modest belongings, swallowing the lump in her throat each time she passed a sun-drenched window or an ornate painting in the mansion's corridors. Despite the opulence, she realized she would miss the intangible parts of this place the most. The sense of possibility, the late-night conversations with Gavin that went beyond tech and finance, venturing into the realm of personal dreams and vulnerabilities. On the morning she left, the sky was overcast, as if matching her somber mood. Gavin walked her to the car, his hands tucked in his pockets, eyes lowered. He gave her a final hug that spoke volumes. Gratitude, sorrow, respect. "If you ever need anything, or if you change your mind," his words trailed off, but the implication was there. The door would remain open. Ava fought back tears during the entire flight back to Idaho. She told herself she was doing the right thing, the only thing. Yet as soon as she stepped off the plane and took a taxi to the familiar drab apartment building, she felt like she'd left a piece of her heart in Los Angeles. Doris greeted her with relief, hugging her close despite her frail condition. For a few weeks, life returned to its usual rhythms. Daily shifts at Judy's diner, rent notices piling up, the hush of uncertainty pressing in. But Ava was different now, changed by the experiences and the knowledge that she was capable of more. She realized it each time she caught herself mentally calculating revenues for the diner or coming up with ideas to attract more customers. She hadn't chosen to abandon growth. She had simply redirected it to the place where her heart needed her presence the most, by her mother's side. That's why, on a quiet afternoon, when the door to Judy's diner chimed and she looked up to see Gavin standing there, minus the tailored suits, minus the entourage, just him, Ava felt her world tilt on its axis once again. He looked uncertain, perhaps even a bit anxious, as though he wasn't entirely sure whether she'd welcome him. "I'm sorry to barge in like this," he said, stepping toward the counter where she stood. "But I couldn't stop thinking about you, about the opportunity you have here with your mother, and about the possibility that we might create something new. Together." Ava's hands trembled. She could see he meant every word. He wasn't offering a rescue mission, nor was he presenting a lavish lifestyle on a silver platter. He was here, showing up in her reality, acknowledging that her love for her mother was non-negotiable. Tears rose, but this time they carried relief and joy rather than sorrow. She took a step around the counter, closing the distance. "You came all this way," she began, voice quivering, "just to tell me that?" A soft, vulnerable smile curved Gavin's lips. "I'd go anywhere for you. Ikra." In the hush of the diner, with its flickering neon lights and the faint smell of overcooked coffee, Ava realized that true belonging had less to do with glitzy ballrooms or rundown apartments, and everything to do with a connection forged by kindness, respect, and shared dreams. In the end, Gavin and Ava discovered that genuine wealth is measured by the people willing to stand by your side. A single act of generosity sparked a connection that defied barriers of class, geography, and personal doubt. Their story, in the hushed corners of an Idaho diner and the lavish backdrop of Los Angeles high society, proves that sometimes the greatest fortunes begin with the smallest gestures. If this story resonated with you, Feel free to like, share, and subscribe to our collection of heartwarming narratives. You never know. Your own life might pivot on one quiet act of kindness that opens the door to everything you've been waiting for. Thank you for sticking around and joining us on this journey. Stories like these remind us that one simple act of kindness can spark a world of positive change. Every decision we make can have a ripple effect, not just on our own destiny, but on someone else's path as well. We hope this tale leaves you feeling hopeful and inspired, especially seeing how selfless empathy can open the door to extraordinary possibilities. Before you go, don't forget to subscribe for more heartwarming narratives that might just lift your spirit or encourage you to pay it forward. Feel free to let us know in the comments what you enjoyed the most in this story or other themes you'd like us to explore. We can't wait to hear your thoughts and share more stories with you.